What's going on, guys? Hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. So I've recently finished Ray Dalio's newest book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. So this is quite a lengthy book. It's about 550 pages, but if you're interested in history, wars, and also how our financial systems are built and destroyed, this is definitely the book for you, right? So obviously, I realize that not everyone wants to read 550 pages. So for a shallower but still comprehensive understanding, there is a video on Ray Dalio's YouTube channel, right? And it almost has 10 million views, right? So of course, we have to smash up the like button to support our content creators, right? And basically what I'm going to do, this is basically going to be a series of basically key concepts from the book. And we're going to start with the most important question of all, right? So what is money, right? And if you do enjoy all these topics, be sure to smash up the like button, hit subscribe, and also hit the bell button, right? So according to Ray Dalio, there are three types of money. Type 1 is basically hard asset or hard currency, right? And type 2 is basically paper that is backed by all these hard assets. And the third type is basically just paper, right? Fiat currencies, which most of the world is using right now, which is why we're seeing all this rampant inflation and rampant money printing, right? So let's start with type 1 money, which is basically gold, silver, and precious metals. And all this its intrinsic value can be traced to how much the cost is and what is its utility, right? So the more demand there is for all this, obviously the price will go up, right? Especially there's this EV boom, so all this metals like nickel and all this are going up and up in price, right? So its intrinsic value comes from its utility and also how much is the cost to dig it up from the ground, right? And the second type is also a hard asset, basically backing the paper money. So it's basically the same thing. It's just that it's too inconvenient to carry around all this gold and all this, and maybe people might rob you or something, right? So basically in the type 2, we basically change it into a paper form and you can use it everywhere. It's basically the same as the gold in the vault, right? And the third type is basically fiat money. And basically this fiat money can be printed without, and it's also a type of paper money, right? And you can see that throughout history, when we're on the gold standard, we have very stable periods of economic growth and economic cycles, right? So there's no big boom and bust cycles like there is now. But you can see what happens is actually war, right? And when there is war, governments really need to print money to basically bolster the war effort. So this is where normally the gold peg is devalued. So usually the system starts with the gold standard and then it moves to the type 2 money because it's too inconvenient to carry all this gold and precious metal around. And during war periods, it shifts from the second to third type of money, which is basically fiat money, right? Because during wars and all, the government again needs to print money to solve all their issues. So next we're going to take a look at the characteristics of money, right? We're basically going to play a game and try to answer this question, right? So on this Excel sheet, I've prepared all these, basically these three asset classes, the gold, the US dollar, and also Bitcoin. And we're going to rank it, right? In terms of durability, portability, divisibility, uniformity, limited supply, and acceptability. And I've added my own one, is basically cost to produce, right? So you can see that these are the characteristics of money plus my last criteria, right? So for gold, definitely durability is 10 out of 10. For US dollar, it's probably like a 9 because it's like a paper note, you can wet it, but US dollar is basically made out of cotton, so it's quite durable as well. And for Bitcoin, it's also 10. So for portability, gold probably gets like a 2 because you can't really carry around gold, right? Scratch it, I think it's going to be a 1. The US dollar is definitely about a 5 because you can think like I can carry $100 bill around, but you cannot carry, let's say, maybe 50 million in $100 bills, right? It's actually very heavy, right? So obviously it gets a 5 because it's like middle of the pack, right? You can carry $1 million with you, no problem, right? So Bitcoin is definitely a 10. So this is not a video of me like saying which is the best or what, but it's for us to understand what makes up money, right? Basically. So divisibility for gold, yeah, you can shave off some gold, but basically it's a 4 out of 10, I would say, because it's really hard to like divide gold up, right? It costs a lot to do all these things. So US dollar, definitely a 10. Bitcoin, definitely a 10. So uniformity, I would say all of it is a 10 because it's basically fungible, right? Limited supply, gold is semi-limited, so it would be around a 5. US dollar is around 0 because you can freely print it. And Bitcoin is also a 10, right? So acceptability, we can start with gold. Basically, if you go anywhere and if their monetary system is breaking down, acceptability is definitely a 10, right? So when it comes to US dollar, I would say around 80% of the world accepts US dollars. So yeah, it's about an 8 out of 10, right? And Bitcoin, I would say it's definitely beginning phases, so it's about a 2, right? So next, the last one, which is my rating, right? Cost to produce. So obviously, gold prices, if it goes up, more people will produce, so the cost of production will obviously reduce, right? Because more people producing, more efficiency, more technology advancement, also more efficiency. So it's basically a 7. The US dollar is basically 0 because there's no cost of production, and Bitcoin is basically electricity and all these technologies, right? So I would say it's about a 7.5, right? Because it's deflationary. So after ranking all this, we can see that gold, obviously it has its merits and it has its downsides, right? And the US dollar is the same, but the core issue of why the US dollar has no intrinsic value is obviously this, right? It doesn't cost anything to produce it. So basically, if I ask you, if you are the chairman of the treasury or whatever, you can print like 1 billion and no one will hold you accountable because there was no cost. Maybe there's like a few cents per $100 bill, right? So yeah, these are the characteristics of money, right? And also their functions, right? So next, we really have to talk about digital currencies, right? Which role does digital currency fit? And I would say digital currencies fit in the type 1 of money, right? Because they are intrinsically valuable because electricity costs and also hardware costs and also labor, right? People's time and effort. But I would say when it comes to digital currencies as a whole, right? This definitely is not a limited supply, right? This is a limited supply because we're specifically talking about Bitcoin, right? But if you're talking about digital currencies as a whole, this a few years ago was 3,000, now it's 13,000 coins. So anyone can mint digital currencies, right? But some assets in particular will have their limited amount and their scarcity, right? So next, I want to take a look at a few lines from the book, right? So it's important to realize most money and credit, especially government issued money that exists now, have no intrinsic value, right? So this is basically what I'm talking about in my cost of production score, right? So they are just journal entries in an accounting system that can easily be changed. The purpose of that system is to help allocate resources efficiently, so that productivity can grow, rewarding both lenders and borrowers, but the system periodically breaks down, right? So I'm not complaining that the system is broken or whatever. We have a perfectly fine system for 99% of the time, right? So the issue is when that 1% of the time comes and it destroys like 80% of all the good times that have been there. This is very devastating to a lot of people, right? So next, we have to look at money, credit, and wealth, right? So while money and credit are associated with wealth, they aren't the same thing as wealth, right? Because money and credit can buy wealth, i.e. goods and services. The amount of money and credit you have and the amount of wealth you have look pretty much the same. But it's actually not the same, right? But you cannot create more wealth by simply creating more money, right? Imagine you went to the printing press and you printed $1 trillion. What would happen? In aggregate, all the goods and services on the planet will go up in value by $1 trillion, right? So you can see that you're creating money, but not actual value, right? So to create more wealth, you have to be more productive. This is why technologies and all this cause us to be more productive, which is why in the past, I think 100 years, we have grown like exponentially, right? The relationship between creation of money and credit and the creation of wealth is often confused, yet it is the biggest driver of economic cycles, right? So when it comes to this, a lot of people misunderstand. Basically, Ray Dalio is trying to say a lot of people misunderstand what is money and wealth, right? So money and wealth are not the same thing, right? Because you can print all the money in the world, but productivity, if it stays the same, the price of this productivity will just go up, right? This is what Ray Dalio is essentially trying to say in this passage. So on the topic of Bitcoin and also gold, right, I do want to chime in some of my own thoughts, because people are always debating about, oh, you should invest in Bitcoin or you should invest in gold, right? But to me, neither of these are actual investments, right? Because why? If you have one Bitcoin, 10 years later, you still have one Bitcoin. If you have one bar of gold, 10 years later, you still have one bar of gold, right? But if you have a farm with 10 cows, maybe 10 years later, you have 20 cows, right? So that is, to me, what an investment is and what an investment is not, right? So to me, these are like basically inflation hedges, so speculative inflation hedges, because we never know what will happen with Bitcoin and we'll never know what will happen with gold, right? Maybe next year gold is banned, or next year Bitcoin is banned, right? So they are hedges against inflation, and I would really want people to think of it this way, right? Because some people are like, I should invest in Bitcoin because I can 100x my money, or I can invest in gold so I can double or triple my money. But this is not the way we should think of it, right? We should think of it in the way that we should invest in these basically inflation hedge assets in order to protect our purchasing power in the future, right? And another thing to talk about is also, we have to look at the underlying mechanics of how these things are formed, right? Because like, why is gold valuable? Because the costs associated with digging up the gold will go up and up, right? Because your fuel costs, your labor costs, your machinery costs will continue to go up. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? So this is what gives it underlying intrinsic value, right? The day where electricity is free, I think Bitcoin will also go down basically in its intrinsic value, right? Whether it will go down in price, that is another question, right? But obviously electricity will never be free. That is just a given scenario, right? Just to think about, right? So now we try to answer the question, right? What is money? And basically all of the above are actually money, right? Your type 1 money, your type 2 money, and your type 3 money is all money. They are just better or worse forms of money, right? So obviously if fiat money is a worse form of money and we are all using it right now, why is it the worst form of money? Obviously there is a money printer that can create unlimited amounts of money, right? So obviously there are some controls over it, because there is like a board of directors, of governors, they call it governors, but basically they are directors, right? And basically they dictate how much money is to be printed and how much money is not to be printed, right? So there is some controls, but definitely if they wanted to, they could print unlimited supply of money. So obviously type 2 money is the second worst, right? Because if you have all your money in a vault somewhere and they exchange you for pieces of paper, this is basically you basing trust on this particular counterparty to enforce this contract, right? Which the bill is a contract, right? To say that if you hand me back this paper, I will hand you back your gold, right? And the best type of money is obviously hard assets, right? So this is things like gold, silver, precious metals, and maybe in this case, Bitcoin, right? We're not so sure yet, because of course the acceptability and whether governments will ban it, all these things will come out, right? So on a final note, before I end the video, this is not a video debating about which system is the best, right? I'm not talking about whether the gold standard is the best or the Bretton Woods system is the best, right? Because there are both upsides and downsides, right? Because during the gold standard, while we have relative stability, if we take a look at the real GDP chart here, right, you can see from the 1800s until the 1900s, which is where we have the relative stability, right, the economic growth was very, very low, right? But when we change to a fiat regime, the economic growth, and this is adjusted for inflation, so this is real GDP per capita, right, not just GDP per capita, right, has grown exponentially, right? So you can see that there are good sides, basically merits, and also there are downsides to each system, right? In the gold standard, we had very stable but very slow growth. And in the Bretton Woods system, up to now, we have very fast growth, but it's very unstable, right? Because the credit boom and bust cycles are becoming more apparent, right? Where else in the gold standard, there was no credit boom and bust cycle. So in conclusion, all these types of money are money, right? But they are just different types and shapes of form of money. And this debate of which is the best money will always continue, right? Because there are some people that will value portability, and there are some people that will value cost of production, and there's some people that will value scarcity, right? So it will continue going on. But in simple terms, type 1 money is the best type of money, and type 3 money is the worst type of money, right? So that's about all I wanted to share today. If you did enjoy the video, do help me smash up the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell button, and with that being said, have a fantastic day ahead, and peace out.